So I'm going to do a really quick rundown of how like everything that Shaun said translates. Not well. That's being really self-aggrandizing. How everything he said relates to the debate world. I'm going to give a brief rundown about a few thoughts I had related to how things Shaun said relate to the debate world and to your burdens when you're preparing a case. And we have to make sure we're at the party in Tenjin at 5, like, I forget the time. Anyway, we have to make sure we're there in time so we don't have a lot of time. Like yesterday, we just sort of let things take as much time as they needed. But today, no case building per se, just like a little talk and then lunch at 1 o'clock, or no, at 12 o'clock, 12 to 1 lunch, and then you have to be back here at 1 for the tournament. So, anyway. I think the first part of the motion, it's not word for word. It's somewhat of a summary of the way Shaun wrote the motion. In order to promote environmental sustainability, this House believes governments should encourage more citizens to be vegans or vegetarians. Some of the words are changed, but roughly the same, right? But this is a little different from how you might see it in a debate motion. I'm not quite so sure about academic debate, like the policy debate, where you prepare one motion all year and do research and so on. But in parliamentary debate, it might be different. Because, anybody who can guess what I'm going to say in like the next 10 seconds? No, okay. Because I don't think you would have this part. Like usually a debate motion won't tell you what your stance has to be or what your argument has to be, your main argument. It'll just tell you what the policy should be. And then you can come up with your own rationales. But in discussion, we got a little bit of this. Like Fong brought up, like, what about the animal rights argument? So, you don't have to make this your main argument. In fact, you don't even have to mention it at all. If you get a motion that just is like, this House believes government should encourage more citizens to be vegans or vegetarians, right? So it would probably be more like in this form. Or you could, this could be your main argument. You don't have to mention animal rights. You could present the argument exactly the same way Shaun presented it. Or you could try to put both of them in. There are two good reasons. And then I think I just heard Kota and Shaun have a very interesting discussion because Shaun was wondering, why did Kota ask me, like, what was my motivation? Am I trying to persuade people to be vegetarians or not? And Kota said, I just was asking because I'm curious. And then Shaun was talking about, but then Kota also followed up, well, but what do you think? Should you persuade people? And so Shaun was saying, well, there are two sort of moral approaches. There are approaches to morality that he contrasted, but I can't remember the exact labels.
Perfectionism.
Yes, perfectionism. One is individual perfectionism, moral perfectionism versus political perfectionism. And he said, well, moral perfectionism I'm not so sure about, but I certainly don't think governments should be in the business of telling people what they should think, which would be political perfectionism. The government has an ideology, and it tries to brainwash you with that ideology. So I think that points out, like, one, the way a motion is phrased, right, that also, this is getting to the debate point I want to make. The way a motion is phrased, it sort of tells you what your burdens are as a team, a government team, an opposition team. It tells you what areas you can make arguments in. So in this case, the first thing, right, we always have this House. And if this House is specified as the government, that can be your first area of clash in the debate. This House believes government should, right? That's sort of one area of clash. In fact, when you're making a case, if you're not sure, what arguments should we run, just look at the motion. The motion gives you clues, right? So this House believes government should. And then, is this the kind of thing government should be doing or not the kind of thing government should be doing? When the agent is specified in the motion, then that's the first question you have to ask yourself. Is this a public good that the government should be promoting, or is this more of a private decision that the government should keep out of? That's one area of clash in this debate. And if you're a third speaker, a whip speaker, you can be doing the same thing. if I'm third speaker on my team, I always try to figure out what do I think the clashes are going to be before the debate starts. And then I double check, through the debate as it goes along. Because if neither team mentions about whether the government should or shouldn't be doing this, if they just talk about the benefits and harms of being vegan or vegetarian, then that's not a clash, right? But if you do talk about it, it is a clash. So, clash 1, role of the government. How many of you as whip speakers have made this a clash in one or more of your speeches? Raise your hand if yes. Okay, good. You should. Like in a lot of debates, that's a major clash. What is the role of the government? All right, so then next part of the motion, you can take it as a whole. Yeah, basically I think you have to take it as a whole. I think there are basically sort of two clashes. One is role of the government, and then one is value of veganism. Is it a good value? Is it a bad value? So that's probably, those are the basic clashes in the motion itself. But then depending on how the debate develops, this is the part where it really depends on what the teams bring up. So under this, value of veganism, vegetarianism, there could be several other clashes. And based on what you heard today, help me out, because I'm just sort of thinking as I go along. I don't have all this prepared. Just that I sort of wanted to talk about a little bit about this motion in relation to motion analysis. This is also why on the workshop schedule, I didn't write your topic exactly the same way you wrote it, because I didn't want to give people an example of something that probably wouldn't be a motion in a debate tournament. I just titled it more generally as, veganism and the environment or something like that, right? So underneath the value of vegetarianism and veganism, what kind of clashes do you expect to get? What kind of areas? C2A, C2B, C2C, maybe there's even a D, I don't know. What areas do you think the teams will clash about?
Environment.
Okay, environment. That one's the way Shaun wrote the motion, as like, he labeled that as the most important one. So environment, good. What else?
Health.
Health. Good, what else?
Personal preference.
Personal
Preference. Preference.
preference. Ah. Personal preference. Right, good. Anything else? I think I can think of another one already, so I think there's going to be a D.
Financial situation.
Okay, maybe. Finance, economy, possibly. That's not the one I was thinking of, so there's at least one more.
Animal rights.
Okay, animal rights, good. That's not the one I was thinking of either. C2F. Actually, and I thought of another one too, so there's going to be a G. What other ones? Fairness. The rich-poor gap. And culture, tradition. The Maasai. Okay, so if you know a lot about a topic, it's good and it's bad. It's good because you're prepared to engage in the debate on any of these issues. No matter what the other team brings up, we'll be ready. We can deal with it. It's bad, it's a challenge because you have to decide what's most important. And if you're a whip speaker, if all this stuff comes into the debate, if you have like role of government plus, how many is this? 7 other clashes. I think saying there are 8 clashes in this debate, it means your whip speech is going to be really, really, really fragmentary and you're not going to have a chance to make a clear point about anything. So you need to somehow group them, which is sort of what we did yesterday, this idea of grouping things into more broad categories. I think that's a really useful skill as a debater too. Like in debating, it's sort of like on Wednesday what I told the UA students. You have like your case and then you have your argumentation. Your argumentation is like how you explain things, it's your knowledge, it's your deep analysis. But there's also your case, it's how you organize things. Like debating is good for both. It helps you increase your knowledge because you want to know more about these issues, but it also helps you increase your organizational skills. So how would you organize these then? Into major classes. Like if all these topics come up, if there are two really, really well-prepared, educated teams, they bring up all this stuff. Role of government's going to be one. That's a whole separate category. And anybody, especially experienced debaters, you've got all these topics come up: environment, health, personal preference, finance, economy, animal rights, fairness, culture, and tradition. How would you organize those into, like, say, 2 other classes? Just 2 out of all these 7. Hint. Think about stakeholders in this debate. One stakeholder is the government. Who are other stakeholders? Citizens, government, and environment. There you go. So, all right, in this debate we had 3 major clashes. First, about the role of the government. Second, impacts on the citizens. And finally, impacts on the environment. I'll talk about all 3 of those and then explain why, whatever side you're on, our side had a better idea than their side. Okay, let's go to lunch.